I've got a brand new segment coming at you today on the Minnesota Tim podcast that I'm excited to reveal. I've done this once before in the past with a guest, but I have never done it with Bob Sanders and myself. I'm calling this guy Bob. Sometimes when people tell me and ask me, hey, what's your name? And I'm in a public setting, sometimes I just say Bob. So this guy is my friend named Bob. That's what it is. That's what we're going to do. So get ready for Take the Bait with Bob and Minnesota Tim.
We're not goons. We're not bullies. No matter what people say or do, we have to be ourselves. You.
Guy Germain.
From where?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Les Averman, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
Charlie Conway, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And I'm Gordon Bombay, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Minnesota! From the lakes of Minnesota.
Okay, so take the bait. The way this game is going to work, there's going to be a statement. And you know how fishers, they like to fish, right? That's what fishers do, they fish. They like to throw their line or cast their line into the lake, ocean, water, wherever. And when they throw out their line, they're trying to get a fish to take the bait. So Bob is going to give me 3 statements today and in the future. We'll see how long this segment runs. And we are going to play Take the Bait. Okay, so segment number 1. Bob, give it to me. All right, give it to me, Bob.
Justin Jefferson would not return to the Minnesota Vikings in 2023 if they were not in contention.
Okay, so what he said, Bob, that is, he said Justin Jefferson would not return to the Minnesota Vikings in 2023 if the Vikings were not in contention. Minnesota Vikings fans have got their feelings, they're a little sensitive. Okay? You go into a cold water and their nipples are going to get hard because they're sensitive. My nipples get hard sometimes. But Minnesota Vikings fans get a little sensitive sometimes. And I don't think it's just Minnesota Vikings fans that get sensitive. I think there are fans all around the globe that cheer on their Minnesota Vikings team or Denver Broncos team or whatever. For example, the Denver Broncos, defenseless hit on Alexander Madison. I went out and said that's as defenseless as a player can get. Madison was strapped down by 2 guys. He was clearly going to go down. And then this Broncos player comes and just headbutts the guy. Should have been a 15-yard penalty. But on my Twitter account, I've received several replies from Denver Broncos fans that I'm a little baby. It's like, okay, you're just a sensitive little wuss. That's what you are. So Minnesota Vikings fans are not really any different because they're a little sensitive. They think, JJ would be back with the club no matter what. He just wants to win. He just wants to get on the field. He just wants Hall of Fame numbers. He just wants to be one of the best wide receivers ever. Well, here's the deal on that. Even if JJ did not come back this year because of his hamstring issue, because the Vikings were 2-9, that wouldn't stop JJ from being one of the best wide receivers in the game. Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, these guys have numerous faults on the football field, yet they're still thought of as some of the best wide receivers ever to play the game. If JJ decided to hold out, of course, even though he was ready to play, Minnesota Vikings fans wouldn't think any differently about JJ. And of course, JJ would never announce it publicly. He would pull a T.J. Hawkinson and say, oh, my hamstring just doesn't quite feel 100%. I just can't quite give it a go. He would never come out and say, yeah, you know what? I'm healthy, but I'm not coming back. But I am so positive, like 100%, not even close, that if JJ was healthy and the Minnesota Vikings were not in contention, that he would not come back. So if I was a little fishy swimming in the ocean or lake or whatever, and I received a bait that said JJ would not come back this season if the Vikings were not in contention, I would 100% take that bait. No doubt. There's no way. Most likely, JJ is going to come back after the bye week. Kevin O'Connell, in his press conference today, said he's getting closer. He is feeling really, really good. We're not going to allow outside circumstances or circumstances of the team drive the decision over prioritized full health. So the likelihood, it seems like the vibes are telling us that, hey, you know what? He's not going to play in the Chicago Bears Monday Night Football game. The goal is going to be for the Minnesota Vikings to be able to beat the Bears without the best wide receiver in football, get to 7-5, have that extra bye week, and then JJ is going to come back. But after the bye week, the Vikings only have 5 games left. So if the Vikings truly were a 2-9, 3-8 football team right now, do you think JJ is going to risk his health again to be nursing a hamstring injury all off season long? If the Vikings were not in contention, you've got to be kidding me. Be smarter than that. JJ would not come back. Is he going to come back now? Yes, he will. Because it's highly likely, like 80% chance, the Minnesota Vikings are going to make the playoffs this year. There's something to come back for. But if there was nothing to play for, why would he come back? As a head coach on the Vikings, I wouldn't even want him to come back. I want you 100% healthy, get your contract, figure that crap out, and be back next season. So that's take the bait number 1. Bob, give me take the bait number 2.
Take the bait. Josh Dobbs was exposed against the Denver Broncos on Sunday Night Football.
Josh Dobbs was exposed on Sunday Night Football. That's what Bob had to say. And I think he was. In the second half, the Denver Broncos made adjustments. And instead of allowing Dobbs to do whatever he wanted in the pocket, survey the field, scramble when he can't find a wide receiver open, they blitzed the living piss out of him. And he couldn't do anything. He got happy feet in the pocket. And you better believe that the Chicago Bears, the Bengals, the Raiders, the Packers, the Lions, they saw that crap. They saw what Josh Dobbs did in the second half against the Broncos and how he struggled. There were receivers wide open. Everyone was blaming KOC's play calling on 3rd and 10 when the Vikings kicked the field goal to go up 20-15. There were 2 wide receivers wide open, and Josh Dobbs had a second or 2 to throw the ball to him. But he got happy feet in the pocket, he scrambled out to the right, and he almost threw an interception. Dobbs was exposed against the Denver Broncos. And the Minnesota Vikings better hope that Dobbs is going to make an adjustment, because Powell was wide open for a first down. Addison was wide open for a first down. And Dobbs could have hit both of them. Instead, he got happy feet. He was scared. And you would expect these next teams to do the same to Dobbs. Josh Dobbs was on so many different franchises in about a year. And what are the odds of these 5, 6, 7 different franchises to pass up on a quarterback? Some of the teams did it twice. Don't you think Dobbs would be good enough to at least stick with the one team for 1 or 2 years? I love Dobbs. He's been a fascinating story. I read a piece on him in The Athletic a couple days ago by Alec Lewis, and he did a phenomenal job on that piece. But reality eventually needs to set in, and Dobbs was exposed. Let's hope the Minnesota Vikings make their adjustments to the opposing defense's adjustments. Okay, take the bait number 3. Bob, what do you got?
Take the bait. Neither Kirk Cousins or Josh Dobbs will be the opening day starter on the Minnesota Vikings next season?
Oof, that's a tough one. Neither Josh Dobbs or Kirk Cousins will be the Vikings opening day starter next season. That's tough because you think about the guys that would be available. Does Josh Dobbs sign a big contract with another team? Does Kirk Cousins sign a contract with another team? There are a lot of off-season questions this summer for the Minnesota Vikings because eventually you would think that they have to draft a quarterback. And when they traded for Dobbs, the idea was that it's going to be a competitive rebuild. He fits the formula for it to be a competitive rebuild. I don't think they're looking for Dobbs to be the long-term franchise starter. And Kirk Cousins isn't going to be the long-term franchise starter either because he's almost 36, 37 years old. So where are the Vikings going to turn to this offseason? This is my best guess. The Vikings will draft a quarterback early in the draft next offseason. They will sign Kirk Cousins to a one-year deal, and Josh Dobbs will sign a deal with another team somewhere in free agency. So it will be Kirk Cousins and a drafted quarterback early in the first 2 rounds on the Minnesota Vikings roster next season. And it's about 9-10 months until September when Kirk Cousins went down with his Achilles tear. And you would think that would be just long enough for Kirk to make a good case that he can play in that opening game. Now, it depends on what quarterback the Vikings draft. If they trade up for a player, top 5 pick, or if they draft a J.J. McCarthy and let him sit under for a year. Because if you're going to draft, I don't know, name your guy. There's a guy from Washington. I can't remember his name. But there's this Daniels for LSU. I don't know what draft experts are saying about him, the Mel Kibers of the world or whatever. But he's shown elite ability, but is that elite ability first round top 10 talent? Of course, there's the Caleb Williams of the world. There's that North Carolina quarterback. If the Vikings get one of those guys, they probably start day one. But if they sign or draft a J.J. McCarthy, then they're probably, you got to think they're probably going to sit underneath a year for Kirk, and then they'll take the reins after that. So my best guess, I will not take that bait, Bob. Kirk Cousins will be the opening day starter against whatever team next season for the Minnesota Vikings. And they will draft a quarterback. And Josh Dobbs will be somewhere else next season. I will say this, though. With Josh Dobbs showing just how spectacular and explosive a running, scrambling quarterback can be in Kevin O'Connell's offense, I think Kevin O'Connell is going to be thirsty for more. Because now that you've seen it, you're going to want it long term. So Kirk, let's say he's the opening day starter next year, but I believe the Vikings are going to search for a scrambling pocket quarterback. Kirk Cousins has the pocket awareness and the ability to make amazing throws. Josh Dobbs doesn't have the pocket awareness and has the ability to scramble and make the occasional great throw. Kevin O'Connell this offseason with Kwesi are going to look for that pocket quarterback that can make those throws and for that scrambling guy that can make those plays as well. If you can do that, then you got Patrick Mahomes. So I think that's the Minnesota Vikings plan for this offseason. Now, whichever quarterback that's going to be, I know the LSU guy fits that bill, but we'll see if he's got enough accuracy, pocket awareness to be that guy. But Dobbs, I believe, has shown KOC and Kwesi just exactly what they've been missing and what they want futuristically in the Minnesota Vikings for that quarterback. All right, I appreciate you listening to this episode. If you haven't already, check out Hokeland Farm for rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed Hereford beef. This beef is sold in quarters and halves, and they also have custom sample packs so you can try before you buy. This beef has no medications or antibiotics, and you get 20% off your first order if you tell them you heard about them on the Minnesota Tim podcast. Contact Jared at 952-491-1541. That's 952-491-1541. 20% off your first order if you tell Jared you heard about Hokeland Farm on the Minnesota Tim podcast. It's beef season. Get beef in your freezers today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Minnesota Tim podcast. Thank you to Bob for being a helping hand. I appreciate it. Everyone, have a great week and a happy Thanksgiving.